Welcome back to Framelines, this is Josh. So, digital medium format. Today's video is about the Fuji GFX 50S, which I've been trying for the last month or so. I want to talk about why I'm giving digital medium format a try, my general impressions of the camera, and then maybe edit some of the files in Lightroom and compare them to full frame and micro four thirds. However, before I jump into it, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's video, Framelines magazine. So, Framelines magazine is a street and documentary photography magazine that Shane and I run together along with the channel. We feature work from photographers who we've long admired along with our own photography. We've got a few copies left of issue 2 and we're working in the background on issue 3, which we're super excited about. If you want to support the channel, the best thing to do is pick up a copy of Framelines magazine, and also a huge thank you to everybody who has already supported with a copy of issue 1 and 2. It's hugely appreciated. So a few years ago I used to shoot a fair bit of medium format film. I've previously owned a Mamiya 6, a Mamiya 7, a Mamiya 645, a Pentax 6.7 and a Rolleiflex 2.8. Didn't own any of those at the same time. This isn't some massive like film camera flex. I bought and sold them and just experimented with different film stocks. However, obviously, you know, the price of film has just been rocketing over the last few years. I also really struggled to get consistent results from my scans, and one day I just got fed up and was like, I can't really shoot film anymore, it's just not working for me. For the amount I shoot, it's just not economical. So I've really just been using micro four thirds or full frame systems since then. However, until now, I'd never actually tried digital medium format. I've recently also become a father, so I haven't really been able to do as much street photography as I would normally do. I've been a bit more intentional about my photography, going on some more local walks, maybe trying some more street portraits, some more still life, some more landscapes, just mixing it up. I think it's really important to try different styles of photography and not kind of pigeonhole yourself. And I think also being able to maybe try a different camera system or a different format or a different lens, along with any other different styles of photography, is quite important. It's quite a good way for me to keep motivated and to sort of keep discovering new aspects of photography that I enjoy, and to kind of keep this passion alive in this hobby that I've been doing for so many years now. So I've been going out on a daily walk with a pushchair, and being able to store this in the kind of storage underneath is quite nice. But to be honest, it's actually not that heavy, it's not that chunky. I'd say it's the same as a pro level DSLR, actually maybe even a bit lighter. I'm really impressed with the ergonomics. The lens I'm currently using is the 45 2.8 prime lens, which is around a 35mm field of view. I'm really keen down the line to try and adapt some vintage glass onto this. I know you can get some quite good results, and they do often cover most of the sensor, so if anybody has any experience with this, I'd love to hear some recommendations in the comments. It would be massively appreciated. Another thing that appealed to me about the GFX, the Fuji GFX 50S, I hate the name, is the 4:3 aspect ratio. Last video I did, I talked about how I'm loving using Lumix micro four thirds systems for street photography. They also use a 4:3 aspect ratio, so I've enjoyed kind of carrying that over to this system as well. Just having that extra height I quite like, especially when like shooting a wider angle lens. You can include like more of people's legs and make sure more feet are in the frame, for example, when doing street photography. I will also say that this is actually quite a capable system for street photography. From what I've read and heard about the system before was that it is very slow, but I don't think it is slow. You can do like a nice quick single point focus. If you're kind of preemptive and you're trying to anticipate the shot you want to get, I think you can capture motion, you can capture some quite dynamic frames. Obviously compared to like Sony or more kind of like sports level cameras, it is a slower system, but 3 frames a second is, I think, fine for capturing motion, for capturing dynamic scenes. So it's definitely a faster, more kind of capable system than I was expecting, which has made it a bit more versatile. But for the most part, I do want to try and do some more slower photography with the GFX. So I'm not going to go into a huge detail about the specs, you can always look those up online. The main thing that interested me was the sensor, having this larger sensor. I think it's incredibly important to have a consistent look to your photography, to maintain a consistent look across your body of work, no matter what kind of photography you are doing, be it street photography, portraits, landscapes. And having the extra latitude and dynamic range of a bigger sensor was what appealed to me the most about the GFX medium format system. So far I have been really impressed with that extra latitude, the depth that you get in this sensor, and also the compression. Like, I'm using a wide angle lens, but it feels It feels more realistic in the compression. It's quite a subjective thing to say, but like there's less distortion, and in that sense, just having this 35mm lens and the high resolution sensor, it means you can crop really nicely and it doesn't feel unnatural. Like if you use a high resolution sensor and a 28mm lens and crop in dramatically, the distortion of the lens just makes it weird. It's not the same as it's not the same as using a 50mm lens, whereas because you've got this lack of distortion with this sensor, I'm quite comfortable that I can crop in quite far. So in this sense, I think you can save a bit of money on lenses. So I would say that this 35mm is basically both a 35 and a 50mm combined, just the way it renders scenes, the compression, the lack of distortion. Is this making sense? Let me know if not in the comments. It's quite a hard thing to explain, but I quite like that about it. I like the way it renders scenes with the lack of distortion and the additional compression. So I also wanted to just jump into Lightroom and see how the files from this compare to files from a Micro Four Thirds system and from a full frame system. So I've got a few examples in Lightroom here. I've got a couple of files from a Sony a7 IV, 3 files from my Micro Four Thirds Lumix GX80, and a couple from the GFX 50S. So let's look at some from the GFX first. So we've got this very high contrast scene. We've got this guy in the shadows here, this guy wading through the flooded Thames. So let's just see how much like we can recover from the shadows. I'm just boosting the shadows in Lightroom. Maybe bring up the exposure just a bit, just to get some more, and then bring the highlights back down. So you can see, yeah, there's a huge amount to be recovered. I just undo that. Yeah, so there's loads of latitude in the GFX files for sure, which I really like, just to have that extra flexibility. Also, if you mess up the exposure, it's quite handy, you know. And then again, there's also tons of detail should you need it, should you want to crop. But also look at this fall off, like it goes very blurry very quickly, which is quite nice. It just makes it kind of dreamy, doesn't it? I really like that. Let's have a look at another option here. So here's just a random shot. I really like the colors of these like rakes and stuff in the back of the van. As you can see, absolutely outrageous amount of detail, more detail than you would ever need. Again, we can recover a lot of information, the shadows and the highlights, and just, yeah, there's so much latitude there to play with. It definitely has, I think, a more like medium format look, the files from the GFX. Well, what do you think? The fall off, the detail, it is quite impressive. But then maybe let's compare it to a small Micro Four Thirds system with a 16 megapixel sensor. So I took this one on my Lumix GX80, do the same thing, boost the shadows. You can see there's just, I'm aware these aren't taking the same error, so it's not a very scientific experiment, but I haven't really got it in me to go out with both cameras and shoot the same scene side by side, I'm sorry. Unless people really like me to do that, but I'm not sure I can be asked. Okay, so yeah, you can recover. I mean, yeah, there is latitude to play with in these files as well. You can see there's still a ton of detail, even on a 16 megapixel sensor. There is a bit more noise in the shadows, but it's not a huge deal. You can probably counterbalance that in noise reduction. Does then get a bit soft, I suppose, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, I would say there isn't a dramatic difference in it. There's definitely like some really impressive detail on the GFX, which isn't quite as matched on this Micro Four Thirds sensor, but I think Micro Four Thirds sensors hold up more than people would think. Here's another one from the GX80 here. Let's do the same thing. Let's just boost it and see how we go. Again, I'm not really one for pixel peeping, but there's some good detail to be recovered there. There's detail remaining in the highlights. I think the Micro Four Thirds sensors stack up better than you would think. You can also have a look at a couple from the Sony as well. So this is from my Sony a7 IV. Boost the shadows again. Take the highlights down. Again, lots to be recovered from the Sony. Little bit of noise. I don't think there's a huge amount in it, you know. It's quite subjective. I think the files from the GFX definitely have that more kind of medium format look. I think in terms of like detail and dynamic range, it's very close versus other digital systems. What you are getting more of with the GFX is that fall off, that depth of field, which is much more dramatic, I think. Also that sort of compression you get where the scene feels a bit tighter, it feels a bit more natural, there's less distortion. So what do you think of the GFX files versus medium format and full frame? Is there a lot in it? For me, it is really down to the depth of field and that extra detail, but it's very subjective, and I think if you're just posting on Instagram, no one will really be able to tell the difference. So thank you very much for watching along. What do you think? Would you like to try digital medium format? If you have, and you've used some vintage lenses, can you let me know some good recommendations, because I'd love to try them out. Please do check out Framelines magazine. Thank you very much for watching along, and see you next time.